All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Lasting Learning Podcast. So glad you decided to tune in this week because we have another spectacular guest. In just a second, I'm going to let him introduce himself. For those of you that are listening, the voice is going to be one that is very, very familiar because I know that everybody that listens to this podcast listens to his as well. Because to be honest, I'm just following in his shadows, man. He is killing it. He's living life and doing it right. Today, I got a guy here who is freezing his butt off over in Connecticut, just like I am up here in Michigan. For those of you that are watching, you can see the stacked wood behind him. He is hunkered down and ready for winter. So today, we've got Dan joining us. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Dave. And listen, man, I guess first of all, thank you for plugging the podcast a little bit. But I have to say, I've been listening here and there to yours, and you're doing some big things. You got the second book out, and I feel like you've done more in the last few months than most people do in a few years podcasting. You're really up and coming. So I appreciate you having me, and you were gracious enough to come onto my show recently. I appreciate that. So thanks, man. Thanks for everything.
Absolutely, Dan. It's that truly means a lot. And I'll tell you, physically, I feel like I'm doing a lot right now too.
I bet I do too, man. I can attest. I certainly can.
So introduce yourself. There might be a couple people out there that are tuning in for the first time. Who are you? What are you about? What is this podcast that we keep talking about? And just what's going on in your world?
Yeah, well, hey everybody. I am Dan Kreiness from the great state of Connecticut. Little state, but big heart. I don't know.
Is that
Anyway,
is that the slogan?
no, I just made that up. I totally just put on the spot. I've let's see, I've been in education for about 14 years now. I've kind of bounced around between the states of New York and Connecticut. And I guess my big thing really is leadership and instructional leadership. And I have a show, a podcast that's a lot about that. It's called Leader of Learning. We've been doing it for a couple years now. We're about to drop episode 56 of the show soon, and it's been doing real well. A lot of traction, a lot of great feedback, a lot of amazing guests like Dr. Dave, and yeah, I'm just really enjoying it. And really the big thing about the Leader of Learning podcast is that, and I say this, well, actually, I'm going to save that to the end because I have like this saying that I always say.
Oh,
It's like my slogan. But
he's been studying. He's got the mic drop moment waiting in queue.
well,
I
when
love it.
you told me about it, and I was like, that's my go-to. So I'm going to save that. But basically, the theme of the Leader of Learning podcast is that everyone can be a leader, and it doesn't matter what role you have or what title you have. If you're in education, anywhere from a classroom teacher on up to a district superintendent or consultant or anyone in the field of education can be and should be looked at as a leader. So I bring on guests and we talk about things that are kind of all over the place, really. But just people who are leading every single day in what they do, whether it's in the trenches in the classroom or like you at a district level, or even people who are just leaders in their own right. So I've had a lot of fun with it, and I don't know about you. I tell people all the time, I'm my number one fan. And and that sounds kind of silly to say, and I might sound like selfish or something, or like I have a big head. But I put the podcast out there because not only do I want to feel really proud about it, but I want to learn a lot from it myself. That's a lot of why I do it. Of course, I know I have people out there counting on me to deliver that content now every other week, but I kind of do the show first and foremost for me. And I've gotten some amazing experiences from doing it, and I've gotten to speak to amazing guests, and I'm just loving it. I really am.
And you're doing it well. And I think one of the reasons you do it so well is you don't produce a show like a radio personality would put on a show. You produce a show that you would want to hear to tell you the lessons that you need to hear. And I love the fact that you're going on. I think you said episode 56.
Yeah.
This started back in 2017, I think, something like that. And that's right along the time that your journey in leadership was really starting to evolve and take off. So it was almost like you were trying to give yourself a tutorial and a pep talk every other week, talking to those mentors out there in the field. Can you talk to
Yeah.
people about your own professional journey a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I would say that, honestly, I hadn't really thought of it that way, but 2017 was a pretty big year for me. I had been kind of studying and thinking of myself as a leader, and really kind of becoming a student of leadership before that. I got my educational leadership master's degree back in 2012, and dabbling in teacher leader roles, like instructional coach and literacy coach. But you're right, 2017 was, I don't know, like a coming out party a little
Right.
bit. Like in, let's see, June of that year, not only was I able to attend my first ISTE conference, and really kind of one of the first opportunities to like network face to face and be this well-connected educator as I was starting to be. But actually, I think I was at the ISTE conference when this happened too. I was named as an ASCD emerging leader in 2017 as well, and that was a pretty big moment for me. And you know, of course, I maintain the fact that like no one really gets into education to win awards, because how many awards really exist for educators anyway? But that was really nice to receive that recognition. I respect ASCD and the mission of that organization very much, and getting to represent them and uphold that mission as not only a member but one of their relatively small group of people that they choose every year to represent them as emerging leaders was it was pretty special. So yeah, that was a good year. And then the podcast, actually, yeah, right around, it was all around the same time. It's crazy.
Great.
Like right before ISTE, I dropped what really was known as, or is known as in the podcast world, as like episode 0, like a pilot episode. I said, let me try this podcasting thing. And it's funny because you mentioned how I really do try and sound natural and have this organic nature and flow to the episodes that I put out. But I did actually study broadcast journalism as my undergraduate major, and so I said, I want to create content. I want to have a bigger impact, beyond the four walls of my classroom, of my school, and maybe even of my district. And I think this is a great way to do it. So the podcast was started around that same time. And then I started dropping legit episodes later that fall when the school year started.
And then it's just been smooth sailing ever since then, right? Like it just keeps getting better and better and better.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'm a lifelong learner. Now I'm back getting my doctorate degree, and I know you can sympathize.
God
But
bless.
I'm almost done. I see the light at the end of the tunnel. Hopefully, just another couple months, and I'll be defending. But yeah, I definitely love learning. As cliche as that might sound, I push myself in a lot of different ways, and I like to, of course, inspire. I'm in an instructional coaching role right now where I'm trying to push people, my colleagues, that I work with every day, to keep learning and keep growing and keep improving their craft as well. So I'm just really big on that. And I think my podcast, when you listen to it, I think you can get that out of it. I think it's evident that that's really what I'm all about. So that's just another way to really keep pushing the envelope by trying to inspire people from all walks of education.
No, for sure, man. And I'll tell you, you inspire me. I'll tell you. So I go work out in the morning before work, and it's gonna sound creepy, but I got you in my ear every morning, man. Because I
Thanks.
didn't jump onto the podcast back in 2017 when you first got out there. So I think I'm up to episode. I can go look right now, like 40 something. So I've got a few more weeks to catch up here, but I love just being able to listen to you having a conversation with these real people, these people that I look up to and admire. And that's what it is. It's just these authentic, real conversations about stuff that applies to me, it applies to everybody in their day-to-day life, whether they're in education or not. It's just basic principles for success and living. So
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate you listening, and I appreciate you saying that. As a matter of fact, I got a really great piece of feedback and compliment. I took it as a compliment the other day on Twitter. Someone had, shouted out me and the podcast and said that basically, and I'm paraphrasing, but basically, they don't necessarily, like, not every episode is really tailored for them and their role in education, but that even though the message or the topic that we're discussing on every single episode may not appeal to them directly, they know it's very likely that they know someone else who it will resonate with. And so they keep listening, and they just know for sure that they're going to be able to recommend that episode or talk about the topic of that episode with a colleague or with someone that they know in education. And that really means a lot because, again, I'm proud of what I put out, and I kind of do it for me first, but to know that people are listening, and that even when it doesn't speak to them directly, they can still actually get something out of it or help inspire someone else that they know can get something out of it. So that was really cool to hear. And, it's feedback like that definitely drives me to keep doing what I'm doing. And, I think if you asked me a few years ago if I would be one of these content creators and doing this podcast thing, I don't know. I mean, I guess I probably would have said to myself, yeah, I mean, I was on the radio in college, so, maybe that makes a little bit of sense, but I don't know. I'm not sure I saw myself going down that path, but it's been really fun and I'm enjoying the ride.
That's awesome, man. And I think you are a testament to when you follow your passion, good things happen. You talk about the fact that you're doing this for yourself first, but I would say that's really what every artist does. When an artist is creating something, they're looking at it through their own lens and saying, "Is this something I'm proud of?" And the best artists are ones that do things for themselves, not for the not for the masses. And then the masses eventually come around. I think that's why it's working for you, man. You have this passion where you were in the classroom doing your thing, instructional coaching, doing your thing, but you knew you still had this thing that was driving you inside. That it was that initial when you jumped into adulthood, you said, "This is what I want to be. I want to go into broadcast journalism. I got to do something with it." And you found a way to make that happen, as opposed to just sitting on that dream. So that's awesome. How did you decide to go into teaching? Let's get off the broadcast journalism thing, because I mean we know what you're doing there. How'd you end up in classrooms?
So, I actually always knew that I wanted to teach, and it's funny you talk about my podcast almost being like an art form. I was a musician growing up. Ever since I was 10 years old, I mastered the trumpet and was recruited and auditioned at some different colleges to be a music education major.
Wow.
So when I first got to the University of Connecticut as a freshman, I had a partial scholarship for music, and I was majoring in music ed and in the marching band and in the pep band. And so UConn's got a big sports program, which was great for being in the band, but it was also great for getting into radio. And I guess when I got into as a student broadcasting, major sports. I mean, I was at college. We're not talking about professionals, but it's darn near as close
Hey,
as you can get to being a professional broadcaster as a college student. And also, I don't know if you know, ESPN is in Connecticut, Bristol, Connecticut. And so, UConn's got a major sports program, and we also have ESPN like down the road from us. So I was like schmoozing it up with some of the actual legitimate professional broadcasters and stuff. And so I guess at that point I said, I think I might be able to do something with this. And I wasn't loving the music education scene. To be honest, my grades were definitely not strong enough for me to even get into the School of Education anyway. So I said, I think I got to switch my major, and I did. First, I actually looked into communications, but I settled on journalism. You know why? Because all you had to do was walk into some office in some building on the campus and say, I want to be a journalism major. And the next day I was a journalism major. So it was just that easy. And I had a lot of fun with it. I did an internship where I was calling some minor league baseball games, and out of college for a little while, I was a producer at ABC Sports Radio. So I was starting to climb the ranks a little bit. But I guess when I sat back and thought about it, I thought, it's just not a career move. It was fun, but not what I saw myself doing for the rest of my life. My wife and I have been together since high school, not married, but we started dating in high school, and we got married pretty quickly after college. And I was like, I can't keep doing this and working nights and weekends and holidays and weird hours. I really want to get back into teaching. So that was like my really long-winded answer, but I always wanted to teach, but I got away from it. What was great about actually having majored in journalism was I was able to easily parlay that into an English teaching certification. And even though I had to go back and get my master's, and well, really, I haven't stopped going to school at all at
Right.
this
Yeah. Yeah.
point. Um, I got my certification pretty easily because of all the writing classes that I had to take in the journalism program.
They say the best teachers are those teachers that can draw relevance out of every learning opportunity and can help the students make connections. And I'm making so many connections to your story. This isn't about me, but true story. I went to college to go into broadcast journalism. My freshman year, I ended up failing out of it was BCA 210. Basically, I had to watch black and white movies Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 8 a.m. Every Friday morning class. I slept through the black and white movie. Couldn't hang. Failed out of BCA 210 and had to switch majors and ended up in education. And here we go. So you know, I've spoken to a lot of authors on this podcast so far who talk about the development of the art of writing and how they use their day-to-day life in their books. You do the same thing with your content on your podcast. A lot of the authors that talk about the trials and tribulations of publishing and going out there and keeping the momentum going with their books and keeping them in the limelight. Talk to me about podcasting for those people that are listening and might be thinking, you just plug a microphone into a computer and talk. I mean, yeah, that is part of it, but you also are trying to get listeners and get people to stay tuned in. And what is your goal with your podcast? Who are you trying to target, and how do you know if it's working?
Yeah, I have a good podcasting buddy of mine, and actually, we work in the same district at this point. Jeff Bradbury does the TeacherCast podcast and has the TeacherCast brand, and he asks a lot of the times when he's talking about podcasting, like, who is your avatar? In other words, like, if you could sort of isolate down to exactly who it is that you're targeting, um, describe them. Who would it be? And I guess I think of like you're sort of uh, not mid-career, but like a few years into teaching toward mid-career. Let's say someone's been teaching between 5 and 15 years, and they're starting to be that up and coming leader, and they may not be an administrator yet. I don't know. I guess that's who I target, and I suppose I could be describing myself again.
Right, there you go.
I'm my biggest fan, man. Like I said, I'm in year 14, so I guess that's me in some ways. Although I did dabble in the administrative ranks a little bit last year, but I guess again, just appealing to those educators who need to know that what they're doing really matters, and to know that whether you love educational technology or you love social emotional learning, or you have a passion for helping with teachers understand what it truly means to manage their classroom or differentiate their instruction, no matter what it is, someone is leading in that field. And that's who I go for. When I look for guests, sometimes I'll throw in some solo episodes. They're kind of few and far between, but like you said, I do like to share my story a little bit with my listeners, and I think that there is some relevance to my story and some things that I personally believe that I can bring to the table, and so I'll throw those episodes in sometimes as well. But I think at the end of the day, for me, it's about telling that story that says, look, uh, you're in it, and you're doing it, and although there are it's like a roller coaster ride, there are peaks and valleys, like you're doing it, and you are leading, and you're leading students, or you're leading teachers, or whoever you're leading, but just to know that what you're doing really matters, and that that I guess that at the end of the day, it doesn't it really, no matter what you teach or what your specialty is, it's all the same.
So let me ask you, you talk about the day job and the podcasting, working on your doctorate, you got kids, you got it all. Where have you learned the most in the last 14 years? Is it going through getting your master's, getting your doctorate, or doing the podcast and talking to all of your guests?
Man, the most, I think, well, let me take you back to, I guess it was like 2015 into 16. My principal at the time created the instructional coach position at my school. And um, when I don't even know if they interviewed anyone else but me, but what they told me when I interviewed was we did really create this job for you, and we were hoping that you'd interview for it, and I got it. And it didn't take me long to start to feel this itch
Hmm.
and try and fulfill this itch to coach other teachers and inspire other teachers. But once I started doing it at my own school, I started getting an itch for trying to transfer that outside of the school too.
Yeah.
And so to answer your question, I honestly think that if I had to point to anything over the 14 years that has inspired my growth and my personal and professional learning, it's been connecting as an educator.
Yes.
And I think I could point to two overarching social media that have meant the world to me in that respect, and that's Twitter and probably even more so Voxer.
Hmm.
I think, you know, I've been on Twitter, I think, since like 2009, but I didn't use it that much until right around that time, 2016. And honestly, the reason I did too was also I was one instructional coach and I was in a relatively small school, but for all content areas. And I was definitely having some, I don't know what you call it, some trepidations
Yeah.
about trying to coach teachers in subject areas that I was not familiar with. You know, I'm certified to teach English and actually music as well. I went back for my music certification. That's, you asked me before about like what,
Yeah.
how did
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
get, you know, how did I choose teaching or how did I get into teaching? So I told you I dropped music, but after I started teaching, I was so hell bent on going back and finishing that I took extra credits and I got certified. So I'm certified in English and music and administration. I've never taught music in the classroom, but I was like, well, those are my subjects. I don't know that I'm going to be super well qualified to support someone in math or
Yeah.
science
Yeah. Yeah.
or like world language or gym, you know, like a phys ed class. Like, what am I supposed to do? So I wasn't sure what was going to be thrown my way, and connecting on Twitter and, like I said, especially Voxer, just really it inspired me so much. Just getting to interact with people across the country and across the world who I could learn from and learn with, and just really gave me such different perspectives on so many aspects of instruction and education that I didn't know about before, and it
Yeah.
just really opened up my mind and opened up my world. And I think that absolutely the learning that I've gotten from a professional learning network and connecting, you know, over the last few years has definitely, I mean, I can safely say without a doubt, I would not be podcasting. I would not have gone back to school for my doctorate. You know, a lot of these things that I've been able to, and been fortunate enough to be able to do over the last couple of years, it has absolutely 100% come from the inspiration that I get from my PLN.
I hear you completely. So I remember when I was getting my doctorate, the best advice I got was from my dissertation chair. He said, complete a dissertation you can get done, and then once you have the title, go out and do something that has value. And that's kind of, I mean, and that's the reality of it. I mean, you go do all this research and you jump through the hoops, but the real value comes in following your passion, not in necessarily meeting all the research criteria. And one of the things I've just recently done in my own district is started awarding professional development hours for simply listening to podcasts like this, because there are so many districts that do book studies. There are so many places that make their teachers read articles, and they're passive and they want them to read these things in isolation. But I'm a firm believer, again, in that power of connectivity. There's something about, like you said, Boxer might have had a bigger impact on you than Twitter did. And I agree. Something about hearing somebody's voice makes you feel connected to them. When you feel like you're having a conversation with somebody that you might not have ever met face to face, you feel like you can reach out to them for help and support down the road. And that's the ultimate goal for all of us, is to help people make connections.
You just reminded me. So just today, we do advisory in our school, and every Wednesday morning we spend a half an hour with an advisory group. And even though I'm not a classroom teacher at this point, I do have an advisory group, and these 12 impressionable sixth graders and I were meeting this morning, and the topic of discussion of the day was basically internet safety, digital citizenship, and being safe, especially with social media. And it was actually kind of awkward for me because some of the topics that came up, we had like this script that we kind of needed to read from, and one of the topics that came up had to do with, not like basically not friending people and following people on social media that you don't know.
Huh.
And so I felt like I was in a
Like an
really
imposter.
awkward position because I'm like, I can't lie to them. I'm like, here I am with over 3,000 Twitter followers and literally every single day connecting with
Right.
people who I don't know and how powerful that is. And so essentially, I played it off as I told them, like, look, you're going to have to be the one to decide. Are you going to use social media like I have for the power and the ability that it does have to bring people together and be able to actually use social networking to network, or are you going to choose to use it the wrong way and fall down all sorts of the rabbit holes that people sometimes do? But it was funny though to kind of have to say to them, look, this script that I'm reading from, like, it's kind of wrong
Right.
because actually, you know what? I meet people on social media all the time. I know it's a little bit different, talking to a sixth grader versus like a 14-year career educator, but yeah, just being able to connect is it's mind blowing sometimes how powerful those connections, those relationships can be, especially when you start meeting people in person. But the learning and the power of connecting is just, it's awesome.
I'll take that a step further. My first interview that I had for this podcast was with a guy named Mike Lippa, and Mike Lippa works at Snapchat, and it was so powerful to me to hear his conversations talking about the power of connections and networking. And he didn't talk about it through digital media or social media. He wasn't talking about teaching kids the skills to navigate the internet. He said what makes kids successful, what the skills that kids need today are the skills of networking, learning how to have real relationships with each other, how to just make those connections and grow and look people in the eye and be honest and trustworthy. All of those quote unquote lasting skills are what matters most. And he said one of the biggest disservices we've done to kids, and this is a guy from Snapchat, one of the biggest disservices we've done to kids today is tell them talk about digital citizenship as opposed to just citizenship, talking about online safety as opposed to just social safety and social norms. And he uses the example, I'm not sure if it was on the podcast or if it was off air, just talking about, they were back in the 80s, people got in trouble all the time hanging out at bars and clubs because they didn't know how to socialize. They'd bump into all these strangers and then end up doing all kinds of crazy things after the bar closed because they didn't know how to have those relationships with strangers and how to handle them and foster them correctly. And all that's happening now is kids are doing the same thing, but in the online environment. We just have to teach networking. We need to teach social responsibility to get people to grow. And I think that's kind of what you do with your podcast. You're almost that third party arbitrator that's helping make connections with people. Say this is a safe place. This is somebody that we can all learn from. So follow me. I'll vet this person for you, and I'll get the dirt for and the truth for you. So I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, yeah, and um, a couple of things. First of all, the piece that you mentioned about like how socialization and communication have kind of changed a little bit in the digital age, so to speak.
Yeah.
I was just rehashing this story the other day with someone. I have a 9-year-old son who is pretty into video games already, and one of the most awkward social interactions I have ever seen happened probably sometime last year when we set up a play date for him with a friend. His friend came over, and this is a friend who he had been playing video games with online. And I mean, it was a friend from school, but like, they were playing video games with each other, my son at our house and his
Yeah.
friend at
Yeah. Yeah.
his. So his friend came over for a play date, brought his Nintendo Switch, and then both kids were just in our house playing video games. And I'm
Right.
like, that's why you invited your friend over? Like, he could have just stayed home and you guys could have played. But it's it was mind blowing in a sense because I just had never experienced that.
Right. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I do think that in some ways that may be the norm, as strange as it seems to
Mhm.
us, that is a thing. And to see the two kids as again awkward, that they're in the same room in the same house, but they're on different devices, and it was strange. But but the way that they were interacting and actually, to be honest, like teaming together in the game, it was actually kind of special at the same time. So um, I agree that communication and socialization needs to look a little bit differently. And actually, one of the other things I wanted to mention as far as connecting and having a PLN is I was just actually contacted by um, a friend of mine who we've stayed in touch over the years, but we started teaching together the first 2 years of our career, and then we haven't really seen each other since. And over the last year or two, I've seen her become more active on Twitter, and she's a tech integration specialist at her school now, and they're leading a professional development session in her district this coming weekend on podcasting and basically using podcasting also to grow your PLN and as professional like personalized professional development. And she asked me to be a part of that, so I'm gonna you know get on a Google Hangout and do a Q&A session and help out. And I think it speaks to, I guess, how far I've come as a podcaster and as a content creator too, but also it speaks to the power of connecting, and that although we haven't worked together in like 12 years, that she thought of me to help out with that. So I'm really looking forward to that opportunity too. And again, it's just one of those things that I've been afforded the opportunity to be able to do now through connecting and through podcasting.
That's awesome, man. So what's next for you? So you're growing right now, man, and truly every week you're you're growing with downloads. You got more people listening, and you're becoming more and more popular. You're getting more Twitter followers. At the same time, you're working on this doctorate and you're doing the instructional coaching thing. Where do you go?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was actually just interviewed on another podcast the other day. I said, you know what, you're gonna have to like wait like I don't know 2 months to ask me that question. Let
All
me
right.
finish my dissertation first. No, you know, you're right, and I appreciate the kind words. It is growing, and I have a growing email subscription list, and we're growing with downloads. We're about to hit a pretty big milestone with the download numbers soon, and I'm about to hit triple digits with my newsletter subscribers, and so I think naturally, organically, what that's telling me is I have to keep pushing the envelope in terms of creating content. And I think it will take another couple of months. I got to get this dissertation out of the way, but um, being perhaps even more not consistent, that's not the right word, but a little bit more, not aggressive. I'm looking for the right word here, Dave. A little more regular, I guess,
Okay.
with putting out content. What I've actually implemented over the last couple of weeks is since my podcast episodes drop every other week, then in the weeks in between, put out a pretty powerful newsletter that has
Okay.
some decent content in it, and some links to some articles that I find interesting, or some resources that I think my listeners, my subscribers will get value out of. So again, I never really thought that I'd be one of those education content creator, sharer people. I don't know what you want to call it, but yeah, I think that's probably what this experience is telling me. And in terms of my doctoral studies, I'm really getting into the leadership thing, and studying what kind of transformational leadership practices inspire a growth mindset in teachers. So, really, like I try and do about every single day at work, um, looking for those specific leadership practices that help teachers want to grow and want to improve, so that their students can be better at the end of the day. And there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm getting there, but I got to push through that.
All right. So fast forward 2 months, you complete the dissertation, you defend successfully. What will your stage name be? Is it going to be Dr. Dan, Dr. Kreiness, Dr. K? Where's it going?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm definitely not changing up my Twitter or Instagram handles.
Okay.
I know you fairly like, just when I had you on my podcast, I know you made a big thing out of like I finally got my name as my
Right.
handle. I think I got to stick with that. But actually, I will say my grandfather, my paternal grandfather, came to this country and was extremely successful. He became a pharmacist, and although he wasn't an actual medical doctor, he was pretty darn close to it. So his customers and really, frankly, his family, somewhat too, called him Doc. And I do think in a lot of ways, my family is looking forward to having a legitimate Dr. Kreiness. And so I'll try and have to play that up, to some degree, but I don't know. We'll see.
Oh, that's awesome, man. Well, congratulations to you. If I don't talk to you in the next couple of months, man, it's quite the accomplishment. So celebrate it. And yeah, make everybody call you doctor. Make everybody, your kids
Yeah.
included, man. Everybody calls you.
I actually had an awkward experience with one of the staff at the college when I emailed her and I did not address her as doctor. She was like,
Well,
"I."
well, maybe not. Maybe don't go to that extreme, but at least make
Yeah,
your
yeah,
kids call you
yeah. I'm not
doctor.
going to be one of those snobbish doctors, but
Or be like me. I'm the doc. I know that my wife calls me the doctor who doesn't actually help anybody. So it's all good. So, all right, this is your moment now. Are we ready? We've built up for this for the last 25 minutes or so. You've got that moment that you were waiting for
okay,
to
all right,
drop it.
I'm ready.
Um, so you've told us your story. You've told us what's going on with you. You've told us where you're going. You've dropped a ton of wisdom on us as well. And throughout all of your podcasts, you've had the opportunity now to share nuggets of truth and wisdom about your own journey. But right now, you are on the second most popular podcast in the world because yours is number one. We're just going to throw that out there. Well, I'm speaking in faith. We'll get there eventually. But this is the second most popular. We've got 7 billion people listening. And you got an opportunity here to drop some truth. So what do you have for them? Drop the mic and tell us what we all need to know.
All right, so as I say at the end of every Leader of Learning podcast episode, this is my mic drop moment. No matter who you are or where you are, you too can be a leader of learning. If you listen to my show, any episode of my show from episode 1 all the way through 55, every episode ends the same way. No matter who you are or where you are, you too can be a leader of learning. And that's my mic drop moment because I'm just really big on that, man. Again, I said it at the start here. Classroom teacher, building administrator, district administrator, consultant, technology specialist. I really don't care who you are, what title you have, or what role you play. Heck, custodian, kitchen staff. I know I've heard you say that before. Anybody who touches lives in education is a leader. And that's what I think I bring to the table, as well as all the guests that I have on in my show. So my mic drop moment right there. No matter who you are, or where you are, you too can be a leader of learning.
That's so good. I'll just throw this out there. The most successful blog post I've ever written deals with that exact concept. And it's the concept of influence and pay being an inverted relationship in schools. You want to know where the real power and influence is? Take the pay scale and flip it upside down. It's the secretaries, the custodians, the kitchen staff. They're the ones with the connections. They're the ones that lead the way, and we're just there to follow. So,
School secretaries run their schools.
true story.
No doubt about it. No doubt. They run the schools.
So
And
true.
I really haven't. Now I have worked with school secretaries who have been less than easy to work with. Let's just say that, but they still run the show. I don't
They
care
do.
how they do it or what attitude they have while they're doing
Not
it.
necessarily successfully or efficiently, but they are still in charge.
They don't get that whole relationship piece, I think,
Yeah.
sometimes, but it doesn't matter because they get the job done. They run the school.
That's the truth, man. That's the truth. Well, Dan, I appreciate you being on here today and sharing so much truth and wisdom with all of my listeners. When you guys are done listening to this, just stop what you're doing. Go over to Leader of Learning. Make sure you subscribe to that. Go back and start listening to the last 56 episodes if you haven't already. Some amazing guests on there. Again, I listen every single morning. Even if it's just for 5 or 10 minutes, I'm getting nuggets of truth every single day. There's something out there that you can grab onto. So join the ride, keep learning, keep leading, and keep growing. So Dan, again, thanks, man. I appreciate you.
Thanks so much, Dave. Appreciate it. Yeah, definitely, love the shout out and love you listening. And everybody can find me out there, Leader of Learning, leaderoflearning.com, and look me up. And man, just thank you so much for letting me come on here and share my stuff. Thank you so much.
You got it, man.